So we're going to switch gears here. But before we do that, I'm going to show a slide, kind of piggyback on the nutrition that we've been talking about, just to add a little bit. Plus, last night we talked about CSP, and one of the enhancements related to CSP is what we call fecal sampling and grazing land nutrition analysis. And there's a software program that goes with that called NutBow. I just wanted to mention that during Ken's talk, he talked about some of the nutrition analysis they've done on range grasses and forbs and shrubs. And another way you can do this enhancement, and I was just talking to Dave, is you can go out and clip plant samples and send them into a lab to get analyzed. But as Ken mentioned during his talk, what we select and what the animals select is quite a bit different. And animals are very good at selecting the stuff they need or the best stuff. Whereas when you go out and hand clip a sample, sometimes you're not quite as good as what the animals pick. So what this does is the animals go out and graze. It comes out the back end. You collect the fecal sample, and the GAN lab has equations already calibrated based on the area, the part of the country you're in, and the kind of grass that you're grazing on. And they can tell you the crude protein, the energy, and also you get a bonus of having the phosphorus in there as well. So something to just keep in mind if you're trying to monitor your nutrition levels as you're out there grazing out on the grassland. And so if you have any questions about that, get with me at some point or go to your local NRCS office. All right, so now switching gears here to monitoring. I just have one slide here basically, and this is in your class notebook, but this is out of this what we call South Dakota Range Technical Note number 8, the monitoring tool, and this is kind of a guide on how to do monitoring. One of the things I talk about with monitoring, probably one of the most important things, is a lot of times we get kind of excited about some of this stuff and we want to go out and just set up a transect and collect data. But I just tell you, have a good idea of why you want to do monitoring. What am I trying to determine before you go out there and start setting up your monitoring? So is it maybe big blue stem? I want to see if my big blue stem is increasing or decreasing, let's say. Or maybe it's, is my bare ground, am I getting more or less bare ground? And so, in effect, having more or less runoff. So whatever it is you want to measure, you want to measure plant vigor. So what this table does is it takes management objectives, some of the more common management objectives that you might have on your place, and it shows for each one of these kind of management objectives which monitoring methods correspond or can give you information about that management objective. And so by doing this, you can set up basically a monitoring objective. What am I going to monitor, how often, and set up a plan that way. So like, for instance, monitoring method photo point, that one is pretty much as good for just about any kind of objective you have out there. It's very useful for anything. Like they say, a photo's worth 1,000 words. Cover poll, which is one of the methods we'll do later on here. That can give you information about riparian condition and wildlife habitat. The line point intercept, the one I'm going to show, can talk about riparian, ground cover, plant species composition changes. So depending again on what you're trying to, the question you're trying to answer, that'll kind of guide what monitoring you use. As well on this table, there's it kind of gives you a rough idea of the time requirement for that monitoring method, and then whether it's a long-term method, something. The difference between short and long-term is if you go out there, collect the data, you can have an answer right away, basically right when you're done collecting the data. That's kind of a short-term method. Or is it a long-term method, one that you got to collect this year and then maybe in 2 or 3 years later, and over time, eventually you get an answer. That's what that means between short and long-term. So this is kind of a guide in there. This monitoring tool, if you talk to your local office or contact myself or somebody else in the class, we can guide you to that. Basically what it is a spreadsheet Excel spreadsheet. And it's got all the instructions on how to do the monitoring, and then linked right within it, it takes you right to the data sheet. So you can print it out, take it to the field, and then come back and fill it in right there on the spreadsheet, and it'll do the calculations for you. It's a pretty handy little tool to help set up monitoring. Any questions or comments? All right, so what I'd like to do, the remainder of my time, I'd like to ask Al to come up, and I think you all know Al. And he's done some monitoring. I just wanted to have him talk for about 5 minutes about some of the monitoring they've done and what kind of how useful that is to them and any.
We're going to time out.
Stan's presentation was called "Any Moron Could Do It," and so he was looking for an example, and I'm kind of his example. We use two main monitoring tools on our place. And the simplest one, we use the photo point a lot, and that's what primarily our book is, because again, with the photo point, just like a photo album, we're able to look year after year after year. We also have a really good resource in West River named Matt Stoltenberg, who is kind of on loan through NRCS and the Bellfish River Watershed Project. And I have pestered him enough over the last 5 years that we've also done line transects, some enclosures, and some other things. And the first time I saw a line transect was at the grazing school in 2007 when I took it here. And they all have different objectives. The photo point is the quickest. We go out 1 day a year. We have it on the calendar the 10th of June or whatever works around there between the 7th and the 10th of June. We go out early because we want to get those photos taken before the cows get in there and change the environment. We chose to do it that way. We could have also done it in the fall after they'd been through. We have a rotational grazing system, you probably know, and we could have gone in there and done it after they were done. As long as we do it about the same point of that season every year, it works out pretty well. We set up areas that we really wanted to monitor. We have some riparian problems. We're very new on our place. We bought our place 5 years ago. So it took us a while to learn the country and then to learn where our place was behind the better managed places in the country. And we tried to assume what that place should look like if it had been under good management for 50 years. And then we tried to assume what caused the damages that were on our place, what we wanted to change, how long it might take to make that change, and what process we could do to make that change. And we wrote that up in a written management plan. And that is how actually we got the funding that we got from all these sources. And everyone that spoke yesterday, including some others that didn't even make it, have helped in the funding of our place. And then, of course, the monitoring is the biggest process. So when we set up our photo points, we needed to concentrate on some of the areas that were really impacted poorly and see how quickly we could make those changes. And if those changes weren't coming along or had reached the point of a plateau and change, maybe we would change our management in there to start pushing that improvement some other way. So we took about 3 or 4 different riparian photo plots, and we had a goal of changing the shape of our riparian channel from very steep and very deep into a much more shallow U-shaped one, which was semi-normal, but not entirely normal for our dense gumbos. That was our goal, because we wanted to get the smallest of floods to irrigate our hay fields. And in the past, both the down cutting, but also they had done some diking throughout our place, and it had really changed the way our creeks were flowing. So we set up a series of photo points looking at cross sections of that creek and longitude up and down the creek, so we could monitor the edges, the depth, the grasses that were growing on the edges, the grasses that were growing in. So that was one set of an area that we had goals in. Then we had some other pastures that had been used heavily for calving, horses all season long, and part of the summer grazing. And so they had a completely different set of grasses in them to some extent because they had been fed outside hay sources. They had been overgrazed, and we had big mats of buffalo and blue grama, weed problems and things like that. So we took those pastures and we set up different photo points and transects in them to document what we had photographically and also what plants we had and the density of those plants and how we might institute the change that we wanted, which was much more of, and I don't mean this ignorantly, but we wanted much more of a monoculture. We were somewhat lucky to have a western wheatgrass-based system, and we wanted to make sure that we were maintaining our base. So we wanted to get rid of that crested, where other people might want to enhance it for early grazing and things like that. We wanted to get rid of it. So we monitored specifically for our western wheat, plant densities, litter, which became a big component for us out there. When we got there was almost no litter. The place had been overgrazed so much. And so litter was easily measured with our photo points, as was plant density. And so some of it saved time. We didn't have to go out and take those clippings constantly like we did yesterday to try to measure the pounds of forage. We were able to visually see how many more pounds of forage, percentage-wise, we might be growing in our plots. And all we basically did is we built the 1 meter square rebar photo grid. And then I just took discs, old farming discs, and we just welded beads on them so that we could have our north, south, east, and west photo points. Instead of picking a place on the landscape, which out where we are is pretty much flat, open grass, we wanted to make sure that we were standing on that photo point and lining up and taking that same photo year after year after year. And we didn't want anything out there that was going to attract cattle to it and that would unnaturally disturb that piece of terrain over the rest of that field. And we found that the disc, we can't even find it. We GPSed them in. We go back there with the GPS, and then we have to look around quite a bit. So we think that we've gotten some degree of accuracy. Then on that same grid that's on the disc, I just beaded arrows on there. I weld beaded arrows, and that's where our 1 meter square always sits. So we've tried to keep those constants in the thing. So we're always looking at the same meter square of dirt. We're always looking at the same 4 points across our fields and across our horizons. And then we took a couple of our better fields. I mean, we tried to break up where those photo points were. We didn't always pick the worst parts. We tried to pick a couple of places that we thought were probably where we wanted to head. You know, these were the areas that we felt this has a pretty good mix, pretty good yield of grass and that sort of thing. And then we did the same with our transects. We set them up with the help of Matt Stoltenberg. We did 100-foot transects. I don't know if we're going to do that again this year or not. And then we measured every foot along that transect, and we I don't identify plants very well, so Matt and Simone identified the plant that was there, what type of plant it was. Was it bare ground? Was it litter? And then every 3 years, which means we've done it once more, we go back and we check it and we try to determine where we're going within that. And of course, a lot of it for us is we do the labor and then we get the expertise from Cheryl Nielsen, who was a range person, Matt Stoltenberg, a range person, but we can virtually call on, any number of experts. So as long as we do the infrastructure and set up the labor, and then ask, and we constantly do, we bother them all the time, ask about different monitoring things that we might institute. We tried the enclosure, and we just didn't find that it was getting enough feedback for us. So we do, I don't know if you've been able to, we're always asking them to do another ranch tour. When we go out on these ranch tours, whether Cheryl has set something up, or the landowner has set something up, it just seems like there's lots of clever ways that people are figuring out to monitor what they have, and they're changing their programs up. And every time we come back from someone's ranch tour, besides eating all their food and drinking all their beer, we come back with some pretty good ideas of how we might want to change our management on that. And a lot of it is on the monitoring side. And that whole phase that you use, Roger, what do you got? What do you want? How are you going to get there? How will you know when you get there? And So, I mean, that's kind of the short of what we've tried to do.
Do you think you could, when you're monitoring landscape changes, could you have done all that with photo points?
I don't think we could have actually. I like the fact, and this is one of the reasons that I was kind of bothering people yesterday on these clippings. I think that I want to get a really accurate sample. I think the photo point is great as an idea of change, but I don't think you can look at that photo and say, this is how many tons of forage I'm producing here now versus what it was. You might get an idea of a percentage of change, but I like to get a little bit better idea. I realize I can't do it every year, but at certain times, I really want that hard data.
So you do go out and measure quantity of forage and stock accordingly, like wintertime?
Well, we're lucky. I think we're lucky. We just run a custom grazing operation at this point. We don't own any cattle. The reason we don't do any winter grazing is we don't actually even have winter water. We bought a really run into the ground place. It was our only chance to own our own ranch. And we knew it going in. And so we run only summer cattle, and it allows us to change our stocking rate constantly. We can order more pairs in the spring. You know, we write our contract. We've had the same grazer for 4 of the 5 years now. We write our contract April 1, like this year. We gave him 4 choices of drought management. We knew we were in it. And we told him, you know, if you choose this program, we're going to wean at this time, we're going to ship at this time. You bring in this many, we could keep them until Thanksgiving. And so, I mean, we have a lot of flexibility. We have a lot of flexibility we think we're not going to be profitable unless we improve our resource. If we went to genetics and if we don't have a grass base, if we can't feed them 12 months a year, we're not going to make it. So we've just been concentrating on grass. That's all we sell. Even the hay we produce, we sell it all. So it's a total grass operation. And so all we have to think about in my limited mentality is improving grass. And even in our hay resource, we've done the same thing.
Sounds like a lot like fun.
Yeah.
That's all Al ever has is fun.
Well, Tim Olson's not here today, but Tim really helped us. We wanted, our place was 5 pastures when we bought it, and none of those fences were standing. I mean, that was historic use, 5 pastures. And the hay ground was all part of the hay ground, was always in a grazing pasture. So they'd hay that ground, not always the same time, but through July and August. And as soon as it was hayed, they could go in and use that summer grass, which meant those cows are always on the bottom. And again, I get along really well, someone and I do, with the old owners. There was one owner in between, but the original owner was there for 45 years, and then it was sold to another guy for 6 years, and then we came in and bought it. And it's just the difference in economics. You know, we don't have any kids. We like the ranching deal. We don't have as many economic pressures because of that, and we love grass. So we realized that things were done on that ranch for economic reasons because they were raising kids and they didn't have as much funding as we had. We made just a commitment. This is the project we want. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And I just felt like this year we're going to take a beating. We're going to ship early because if we don't, we're going to just impact our progress. And the only way, because we need more funding now, I'm already begging for solar pumps. And the only way we're going to keep getting funded is to show that we can achieve something. And you know, we don't achieve it on this. You know, Roger and I have had this little discussion. We rotate 4 times through. And every good grazer out there is like, you're going to hurt that ground. And we still leave a tremendous amount of grass. We just move very quickly. We like to move our cattle. You know, we're just topping things off. We think that that's increased density and increased plant health. But there is some questions. I mean, and so it's not like an easy thing at all. We've reached a point where we're starting to actually get that U-shaped creek bottom. And the question is now, you need to put cattle in there and you need to beat those banks down. And I'm pretty slow, but I do fight against a few things that I'm not comfortable with. And so we're really fighting this. Is it ready to run cattle in on there? And there's just some days that are spent just beating that process to death. That mob grazing idea. You know, we're being pushed on that mob grazing a little bit. So it's not really very easy. There's some stress involved.